Внимание! Вы находитесь возле охраняемого периметра зоны экологического бедствия. Незаконное пересечение периметра влечет за собой уголовную ответственность.
Greetings, comrades! Today in Project Spark we're putting together another Stalker-themed loadout. So you can make some buterbrot, pour some warm tea, and get comfortable. Although make sure to watch this video till the end because we do have a special announcement to make. Out of all the factions, probably the least attention, unfairly so, is given to the military. In my eyes, it is actually one of the most interesting, both in terms of lore and in terms of equipment. Famous for their monolith and farvater operations, or for casually keeping out all the gopniks from the zone, they're definitely worth taking a look at. I'm Aramid, behind the camera is Bandit.
Привет.
And without further ado, welcome to the video. Just like with our Novice Stalker impression, which you should definitely check out if you haven't, we're not going to simply copy in-game gear and characters. Instead, we will assemble an authentic and realistic kit based on what is seen in Stalker, but using real items contemporary to and available in the setting. Speaking of the setting, it is important to point out that our impression will be based on the original Stalker trilogy, and not on the newly released Stalker 2, which I have yet to form an opinion on. Given that, we're set circa 2012, of course in the alternate and anomalous version of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, which is located in northern Ukraine on the border with Belarus. The very dangerous and mysterious zone the military is meant to contain and protect. However, the military is a mystery of its own. Let me explain, comrades. The faction is called simply the military or the army, but the insignia seen in-game labels it as the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, or in other words, the police, called Militia at the time. More specifically, the State Service of Security under the said ministry. Whereas gear and uniform, despite being partly fictional, correspond to that of the actual armed forces. This way there is generally no telling what units or service branches are represented in Stalker, which gives us relative freedom in our own selection of gear. Therefore, we will be using a lot of what was generally seen in the armed forces of Ukraine in this time period. But to be more specific, we are recreating a lighter and simpler loadout seen in soldiers stationed on the outskirts, like Kardon for example, rather than better equipped Spetsnaz units or military stalkers performing operations deep inside the perimeter. With all of that out of the way, let's gear up Bandit to guard the perimeter of the zone.
Wait, tell comrades about sponsor.
But we have no sponsor. This video was actually sponsored by you, comrades. I want to give a massive shout out to everybody supporting us on Boosty and Patreon. Without you, this video would be impossible. We have big plans for beautiful content for the future, but there is absolutely no way we can source all the gear on our own. So if you like what we do, if you like the content, you can support the channel as well. The links are down below in the description. Thank you! For the base layer, any contemporary military or commercial underclothing is perfectly adequate. This is more important if you're like us, filming a summer loadout in the middle of winter, blять. In terms of clothing, soldiers in Stalker wear uniforms resembling actual Ukrainian uniforms of the time, or at least sharing the camouflage pattern. Therefore, we will logically also use a real uniform. It is a slightly modified Soviet Afghanka pattern from the 1980s. The kit consists of a field tunic and pants, in Ukrainian Dubok camo, which is also essentially a modification on one of the green variations of Soviet Butan camouflage. This specific set was manufactured in 2009. It is not a good fit for neither me or Bandit, so we will have to bear with that, but to replicate the in-game appearance, it is better to tuck the tunic under the pants. An airborne variation of this uniform without lower pockets would be a better option if it was available, because those are meant specifically to be worn like this. With that being said, a Soviet-produced Afghanka uniform, in green variations of the Butan camo, is an adequate alternative, as they were used extensively up to the 2000s and even later. And this is what the uniform looks like when worn. Footwear in-game resembles either light combat boots or perhaps American jungle boot replicas. It is hard to tell specifically. This leaves us some freedom for interpretation. In reality, the most common footwear pattern across all post-Soviet armies were leather berцы-type combat boots, with commercial options being a lot more popular than standard issue patterns because of better comfort and better quality. We have a Russian-produced pair which, for this time period, is just as adequate as any Ukrainian or Western-made alternative of the same type. As per Headwear, we decided to use an authentic black 3-hole balaclava, a very popular item at this time. It actually copies a specific character from Shadow of Chernobyl. To round up the clothing, we will add a pair of commercial tactical gloves, similar to those seen all across Stalker. This pair was modified to be fingerless, which is a bonus point for authenticity. We will also complete the uniform with a Soviet officer's belt that is used by soldiers in-game. We have an actual Soviet belt made with brown leather, but similar ones are still produced in common black leather as well. Any version would work well with the kit. Military personnel in Stalker are equipped with fictional chest rigs seemingly without ballistic protection, which is for lighter loadouts like what we are putting together. To replicate that, we selected the Ukrainian SD1 load-bearing system, also in the Dubok camouflage but in a different print. This is perfectly fine because the amount of variations of Dubok is nearing pizdец. The SD1 has several integrated magazine, grenade and utility pouches, as well as a dedicated pouch for an AK bayonet, which is a surprise tool that will help us later. On the back, this chest rig is equipped with a series of large pouches meant to replace a backpack. The SD1 was developed in the 2000s as a standalone LBV for the Ukrainian Airborne, inspired heavily by the Russian chest rigs of this time period. Ours was manufactured in 2011, has seen some pretty extensive use, judging by the condition, and has some field modifications and repairs, which makes it even more authentic. And this is of course the SD1 equipped. If you're aiming to recreate a heavier loadout with ballistic protection, I recommend looking into 6B5 vest variations or Corsar M and M3 body armor as well as Sfera family of helmets, but I digress. Of course, it would be pretty complicated to keep out all the debiles trying to sneak into the zone without a service weapon. In-game, the military is equipped with several fictional variations of real firearms, mostly the AK pattern. Worth pointing out that Kalashnikov rifles in Stalker have their charging handles on the left side instead of the right as in reality, which is quite funny if you're familiar with the consequences of that in real life. For example, there is the AKM-74/2, which is quite clearly based on the AKS-74, but with green plastic furniture. More specifically, the AKS-74N version, since there is an option to attach PSO optics. Therefore, we will simply use an airsoft replica of the AKS-74N. Since there was no standard green furniture for the AKs, well, apart from commercial options at the time, we decided to install a black polymer handguard and gas tube cover as a nod to the in-game modifications. Otherwise, it's a stock AKS. AKs were usually issued with a combat load of 4 30-round magazines, having one in the rifle and 3 more in pouches. 6L20 and 6L23 mags are kosher to the AK-74 variants. We will also throw in some stripper clips and a clip-to-mag adapter used to refill magazines with loose ammunition. Another attachment we decided to include is the Soviet 6H5 AK-74 bayonet, especially since it has a place in the chest rig. The bayonet can function as a multi-tool and is definitely a cheeky-breaky addition to any AK-based loadout. It can be worn on the belt, but in our case, as I already mentioned, it can also be attached directly to the SD1 with an integrated clip. For more interesting knowledge on the standard issue AK attachments, you can check out our Soviet MOTOSTRELKI video. But to complete the combat load of this impression, we will add an RGD-5 grenade replica, which of course fits perfectly into one of the grenade pouches. The sustainment load of military kits is poorly represented in-game, but one thing we do come across is a belt-worn canteen. It so happened that we actually have a perfect option for this specific loadout. This is a Soviet Army water canteen, but instead of a regular green cover, we will use a post-Soviet Ukrainian-made cover in yet another print of the Dubok camouflage. The best place for the canteen is of course on the belt. To bring the impression to life, we will add several sustainment supplies and some personal items. We will start with medical equipment, which is actually somewhat represented in-game. We have an IPP1 individual bandaging package, an S-Mark tourniquet, and the iconic AI2 individual medkit, which is of course specifically shown in Stalker. They will take their place in utility pouches of the chest rig, where they fit well and are easily accessible if the need arises. Another useful item is a Soviet ID1 model personal dosimeter, a part of a larger ID1 group kit. It is meant to be attached to equipment in order to control exposure of personnel to ionizing radiation, while working in dangerous environments such as of course the zone. I'm not sure if these were still in service at the time of our setting, but I decided to include it anyway for the lack of a better alternative. And finally, we will include a pack of Ukrainian cigarettes and a classic Zippo lighter. These will take their place in one of the grenade pouches, because who the debil needs that many grenades anyway while sitting at a campfire in the middle of nowhere? And with that, our version of the Stalker military loadout is practically complete. As always, this is just our own interpretation of the loadout and many things could be improved on. For example, joint protection or an appropriate gas mask kit could make this impression even better. If you comrades have any ideas or suggestions, you are welcome to share them down in the comment section below. And for all of you who watched the video up to this point, we have a special announcement. The channel recently hit 5,000 subscribers, which is quite a lot, and I want to thank everybody who subscribed or is considering to do so right now. This means that the PSPC community Discord server is now open to the public as I promised in the past videos, and you are welcome to join it. The link is down in the description. In light of the holiday season, I want to thank you all once again for supporting the channel, be it with your subscription, comments, or watch time. I'm sure that in the future there will be many more beautiful videos from us for you to enjoy. And regardless of when you're watching this video, I want you to enjoy what you have, because you could be looking back at these days as your happiest. It is up for all of us to make 2025 better than previous years. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and stay cheeky-breaky. Давай! Дебил, что ли?
Крутят они, стараясь, вертят земную ось.
This video was actually so...
Влюбленным раньше встретиться пришлось, чтобы однажды утром